Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. This podcast seeks to give a voice to real people around the world who are attempting to stay free, stay sovereign, and stay sane in a world which is changing faster than ever. In this episode, I talk with Julie, also known as Mother of Hope on Twitter. Julie is a popular voice in the freedom community online and a familiar face at the freedom marches in the UK. We talk about protests, the freedom movement, the nature of the new normal, and how to remain human in the post-COVID world. I hope you enjoy this conversation, and if you have any feedback or suggestions for interesting guests, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. A link is in the show notes. On to the episode. Julie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I've been following you for quite a while now, really since quite earlier when this all began, maybe in last May or June time. So it's good to finally get to have a proper conversation.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Virtually.
Yeah, virtually. But I don't know, there is a protest this Saturday, right? So maybe it won't be virtually.
Yeah. I mean, I won't be going to the one this weekend unless I think there's actually a local one near me in Halifax, which I might be attending. But it was costing me quite a lot of money to go to London so frequently, so I've had to not go as frequently.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, these protests ultimately have got to take place in lots of different places and they've got to go local. So, there's no kind of harm in doing things locally. In fact, I think there might be a lot of advantages there.
I think that many of us found that we were getting a little bit disillusioned with the way that the protests were going. We couldn't find transparency within who was organising them or what the aim was. And the last one I went on, it felt like a little bit of a road to nowhere. I can't remember where it was we went now, but there was just this band fronting it, and there were lots of religious people at the front, and it just felt like I was part of something that it wasn't intended to be. And the one before that was similar, I think, because they ended up at a shopping centre, and many of us have thought, well, why are they taking us down these, seemingly useless places? We want to be outside the places where people are going to see us on busy routes. We don't want to be at some random shopping centre or, headed by some religious, steel band or whatever it was. So again, that's that kind of knocked it out of me a little bit as well. But a lot of people locally have been inspiring me, talking about the ones that they're having closer to home, and that they feel like we've got a lot more control over them because they're grassroots. So,
yeah, I actually wasn't around during the time when people seem to have kind of got more disillusioned. When I left the UK, it was in May. And before that, I actually felt like the protests were going really, really great. The ones that we had kind of at the beginning of this year, probably kind of, maybe it was like March or April, were like fantastic. Like I actually thought that it was moving in a really, really good direction, and it seemed to carry on that way for a bit, but I get the impression it was maybe kind of middle to late summer that people started getting a bit disillusioned by the way that they were being organised particularly.
I think there's it's difficult because whoever organises it, I can understand why they didn't want to publish the route until the last minute, because then it could be the police or whoever could see that route and act upon that information in a negative way. But by doing that, the people attending the marches, didn't get to see the route until the last minute. So we couldn't make up our minds whether we thought it was a good route or give some input into what we thought about it.
So I just want to go into a little bit of a background about yourself. Where did the name Mother of Hope come from?
Well, I suppose you just have to call yourself something on Twitter. I wasn't on I say I wasn't on Twitter. I was on Twitter as my business. I was a face painter. I had a face painting business prior to all this happening. And it was a nice, you know, successful enough business. I enjoyed it. It was creative and all of that. And then all of this happened, and I had to give up on that. I had to sort of, and I did that fairly early on. I accepted that it wasn't coming back, that I would never have that business again, because it relies on interacting with people, people feeling free, not wearing masks, people trusting you with their children to paint them. All those things I wouldn't be able to do under what I knew was coming. So, and obviously I'm a mother as well. So I suppose those things came together to give me the idea to call it Mother of Hope, because it's like, well, yeah, all this stuff's going down, but I like to think that it's a temporary thing. And I know it's going to be a long temporary thing. I don't see that we're getting out of this that quickly, but still, if you have hope, you've got something to cling to, haven't you? You've got the idea of another day. So yeah, I guess it's that. Yeah.
And I saw that on your Twitter that in your bio, it says that you're libertarian. Is that a recent thing, or is that something that has been a part of your philosophy for a while?
I don't suppose I gave it a label until the last few months, because I always saw myself as more to the, like, politically to the left. But then when we see how the left have acted around all this, then I've had to kind of revisit that and think to myself, well, am I really politically left? And I think a lot of people did the same. They started thinking, well, what exactly am I? And I mean, do we need to give ourselves labels anyway? I don't know. But out of the labels on offer, I think libertarian is the one that seems to resonate most with me. Yeah,
it's interesting. I get the impression that a lot of people who are on the left have had to question their political ideas. And it seems to me that a lot of people who even now are still saying, oh, you know, I'm on the left, but we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing that, etc. Like, it seems to me they're libertarians, whether they are aware of it or not. The one that comes to mind is, who is it? The guy who kind of, that's his thing, is being the left wing guy who's the anti-lockdowner and the pro-choice when it comes to vaccine. I'm blanking on his name now, as I always do, but I'll remember it in a second. And he's still saying, oh, you know, I'm on the left and stuff. But then I'm like, well, what views actually do you have which are on the left? Because you know, it seems very much like he's a libertarian that hasn't necessarily recognized it yet. And I think that's the case for a lot of people in this. I mean, I came to that realization a few years ago. You know, I was so sure I was on the left, and then I was like, oh, wait a second, actually, I don't agree with this and I don't agree with that. And in the end, it wasn't until I kind of started reading about and learning about libertarian philosophy that I was like, oh, I'm not on the left at all. I'm actually a libertarian. I actually think it's kind of an easy mistake to make, to kind of slip yourself in the wrong political category, essentially.
And it sounds so close to liberal, doesn't it? And of course, it's a different thing.
Yeah, and it actually did. You know, initially it was about liberal values. Now, traditional classical liberal values are now libertarian values. They're not. They really have not much relationship to the kind of modern left, I guess.
I think that many of us are questioning the whole political system as well at the moment. I know I am. I think I went into this as many other people did. You know, contact your MP, sign the petition, all the rest of it. And then you just realise that those channels are empty now and they're not working for people. And it's quite a bleak realisation that there's no one that's, but at the end, that's still quite liberating in itself. The fact that you've got to do it for yourself, the change is going to come from the ground upwards. It's going to come from real people and not someone in power. But we're so used to being nannied out, we're being looked after. And by doing that, we can blame people as well. We can say, well, it's your fault. I voted for you and you didn't do X. But I think the whole thing needs dismantling from the bottom up, and revisiting. There's a structure, and I'm not sure what the next structure should be, because if you don't have any structure, then it's chaos, and is that any better? But I just know this one we've got currently isn't working for us.
Yeah, it seems to me actually that that if you did have chaos, it would be better than where things are right now, because at least with chaos, you still have the freedom to direct the chaos into to try to make something out of the chaos, and to try to have a life of freedom and have a life of self-sovereignty. Whereas what we're under right now, it's worse than chaos, because it's chaos which is being thrust upon you by a centralized authority. So it's a centralized authority which is just like hell-bent on taking away everyone's freedoms and diminishing the quality of everyone's lives through this complete madness. So I actually think that when people say, oh well, democracy's democracy's just the best of a bad bunch or whatever, I actually just think that if we completely got rid of all politics now and just went full anarchy, and I'm not sure that I would necessarily consider myself a full anarchist. I would say I'm probably more a minarchist. I maybe believe in extremely small government. But actually, if you just had full anarchy, I cannot see it being a worse situation than what we're in now.
I agree. I think that people have got into the habit of, trusting others to look after them. And obviously that serves those people that do that, doesn't it? And it's always gone on, but it just feels like it's being hurtled along at a faster pace at the moment. And I really, I believe that a lot of it is we're being disabled, we're being active. I remember Rosa, is it Corey? I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. Just before she died, I used to read a lot of her posts on Twitter, and she believed that, I remember reading a tweet of hers about the fact that we're being disabled as people. We're being disarmed. All these conveniences, so-called conveniences that we have, lights that switch on for us, and things that beep, dryers that beep when they're finished. All this, they're all sort of chipping away at ourselves, at the human, to do things, and even just stuff like lifts, anything. It's all been over a period of time, so that we're almost like little kind of program robots now, just sat there waiting for the next bleep or whatever it is to, usher us along. And we've lost contact with that. I think the creativity of the spirit is being crushed, and the two are linked. I was thinking recently about writing and how everything's chosen from a menu now, and we've got into the habit of choosing fonts, for example, and choosing type sizes. And how different is that to being able to actually construct a script with your hand, with a pen? Even just stuff like that is stripping the creativity. All these responses when you like something on Facebook, and it will preempt something, won't it? Oh, thank you, or good luck, or whatever it is. And you're being shunted into this box, and it's zapping us of creativity.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And, also just people don't really have that much of an ability to run their own lives now because of this onslaught of technology. And, I'm a massive advocate for technology, but I also think that people should be able to use it and understand it. And, for instance, like with cars now, if you buy like a modern car, it's just impossible for you to actually be able to, without being a pretty experienced mechanic and being on top of the latest vehicles, like you're not going to know what you're doing with it. Whereas like older cars, people kind of knew what they were doing. They, you had kind of like generic parts which went into it that you could just kind of like pick up from, and they were the same in different vehicles, and nothing was kind of this. It wasn't all just like proprietary like it is now, and people could kind of fix things, and now it's just like everything is just impossible. I mean, if you've got a problem with your car, it's like, well, I've got to take it to the mechanic. And even like what you were saying, something like a lift, it's like if your lift breaks down, someone needs to come and fix it. You're not going to be able to go and sort that out. It's kind of like, as we move away from legacy technologies, just things like stairs, or obviously I'm not arguing we all go back and start using candles and start making our cutting our own firewood, etc. But there is something to that which frees the human, and I think that as we kind of go down this path towards ever more complex technology, our ability as an individual to be self-sovereign, it kind of runs away from us.
There's two. I think there's such a thing as too much choice. I mean, and I think with too much choice, sometimes the quality is impaired. You've only got to look at TV to see an example of that. How, back in the 80s or whatever, you did get higher quality programs that took you on more of a journey, that made you think. Whereas now, everyone's got something to sell. There's adverts every 2 minutes. They're all kind of honing this culture of having a short attention span of this and this and this. And I don't think that's doing us any good either as humans. And I think it's all contributed to where we are now. Say we lack that. We lack the creativity in ourselves we once had, that was once innate, that we could tap into. And we say we're being bamboozled by all this tech that's kind of saying, but you could have this or this or this. And really, we're not given the space to think about it, which is what we really need, to process things and have real connections and conversations. Well, everyone wants to get things out in blurts, and I don't think it does us any good.
Yeah, totally. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to start this, is because everyone at the moment, most of the conversation we're having with each other is like very short, whatever it is, 280 character tweets. And having conversations like this are just so important. And this is why, when they're doing things like, the kind of censorship that's going on these platforms doesn't actually concern me all that much, because if anything, it might just force people to go out and meet each other in person. If we're all getting banned from these platforms and the only way to meet the community is by going out and doing stand in the park or going to protests, etc., at least that's making real connections between people. So, I do think there is a kind of like human yearning for that, and maybe technology's pulled us away from it, but as they try to close down the technological channels, I don't think people are just going to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm being censored now on Twitter, so I guess I'll just, talk about different stuff. That's just not how this human spirit works. How the human spirit works is, if I've been censored on Twitter, I'm going to either try to navigate around it using technological means, or I will go back to more legacy ways of doing things, i.e. meeting people, etc. But you're not going to just censor people to the point where they just go, oh, okay, I give up then. That's just not how things are going to go, in my view.
Well, that would be the hope. And I think for people maybe like myself and yourself, that would be the case. But it depends on how determined you are, how strong your spirit is, because there will be people, sadly, who do get lost along that. They'll drop out of Twitter, and then they'll suddenly feel that they can't connect. I mean, I'm okay, because where I live, there are quite a lot of like-minded people that I can connect with. But imagine if you are the only person in your village or town who has these kind of opinions. Who do you connect? What do you do then? Do you kind of walk for miles, get on a bus, have a big drive somewhere, just in case you think you might have a connection with someone? So I think that it's those people who are going to suffer if this worsens, because they are going to. And I guess that's why you have to do your best to make connections with people and travel to find those people if you can now, while you know who they are, because you're not always going to know who they are and where they live. And at least now we've got the means of finding them. It's like if I lived in a little village and they closed my Twitter down, I'd at least know where there were other people that thought the same as I did, and I could locate them and meet up with them or whatever.
Have you met other people kind of from the protests and stuff and made like personal connections through this time?
Definitely. I mean, I'm probably on Twitter way more than I should be. But I think that's it's common to a lot of people. And it's lovely when you meet the people that you speak to online, when you meet them in person, because it's beautiful. Because for one, there's none of this nonsense that you get in inverted commas, the real world, where it's like, well, do I hug them? Do I, what do I do? there's this kind of instant feeling that, yeah, of course they'll be up for a hug and an embrace or whatever, a smile. They'll want to engage. They'll want to speak freely, to get close. And I think that's what I got from the first protest. It was so different to what was happening in the supermarkets and the shops and everywhere else, public transport, where people were avoiding you. Suddenly you went to these protests and people were acting like human beings again. And that was why I wanted to go to more. I mean, a lot of people at the time were saying, well, do they do any good? And I was saying, well, do you know what? They do me good. And just that energy of feeling good and feeling up will surely spread, and then other people will feel good, and it will inform what you write, what you say, all the rest of it, and it spreads through.
Yeah, this is such an important point, because I agree, it does seem like people who are kind of more negative towards the protests, that's their kind of accusation is, is it doing any good, or is it just the same thing every time? Is it getting media attention, etc.? For me, that's just not the point. The point of it is to go out and build connections and to meet people and to get exactly that feeling you're talking about. Finding other people who are still on planet normal and actually kind of being like, oh, I'm not crazy. There are people who still want to hug and who still want to laugh and smile and show their faces and all the rest of it. That is so important, because we can't lose that. We can't let that go. And if you don't go to the protest because, BBC decides to report there's only 20 people when there was, 200,000 or whatever, then you've just, they've won then. That's exactly what they want. They want you to start going to the protest. So, saying I'm not going to go to the protest because X, Y, Z, if you enjoy it and it brings you something, which I think it does for all of us who are going to these things, then that's a good enough reason.
And it's lovely when you meet someone sort of twice, 3 times. It's like, it is like meeting an old friend. And I don't know, it's lovely. There's something to say when we're on Twitter and we're like, oh, well, I'm going to see you there. Are you going to see me there? Where are we going to meet? What are we going to do? And just people are the ones I've met do seem to be like they are on Twitter. I mean, I've only met so many of them, but the people I've met them and it's been like, yeah, you are exactly how I imagined you. That's lovely that that authenticity isn't lost in tweets, that it's coming through, and that they're able to show their character, like you say, even within these 200 and whatever it is characters that they have. And I think that the way that people say about the protests, not achieving their aims, half of them don't know what those aims are. You can ask a dozen people what are the objectives of the protest, and they'll give you a dozen different answers. Some will say, oh, well, we don't want masks, we don't want vaccine children, we don't want vaccine passports, whatever it is. People have got different ideas on that. And again, people have got different ideas on what the protests should be. Should they be in the centre of London? Should they be local? Should they be outside MPs' houses? So until you get some kind of agreement on that, how do you even do that? Which must be a problem for the people who are organising them, which again brings us back to maybe that's why the grassroots ones closer to home are the best ones to attend.
Yeah. No, you're right. There is just so many different reasons to go to them, and I don't think any reason should necessarily be kind of put above another either. And I'm not sure that they are. I think that people just generally accept the important thing is that we get out there and show there is opposition to this, and show there's another conversation happening. Because if you were to look at the mainstream media, you wouldn't even know. I mean, it's just so far gone now that you just would have no idea that there even was a movement out there of people who were against this stuff by watching mainstream media. Your opinion would just be, oh yeah, everyone's on board with this in the entire world and everyone's okay with it, and there's no protest and there's no, there's every government's just in lockstep and we all agree with this and we all agree that the vax is safe and effective, etc., etc. There's just, it's so far distance from reality now if you watch the mainstream media that it's just two different worlds. I mean, I never watch it, but when I see that my parents have got it on or whatever, and I'll kind of walk past the TV and I'm just amazed. That this complete fiction is just being pumped into people's houses every day. And if people aren't out on the streets, they would never know of it. And, it's another reason to be out there. It's just to show, look, there is a conversation happening here. This isn't all a one-way street.
Yeah, I do watch some of it, but I like to try and watch it the way you'd watch an anime, really, to inform yourself. And there are a lot of purists who will slate me on Twitter for that. Why are you watching the BBC? Why are you watching, Good Morning Britain or whatever it is, even Coronation Street? Well, I'm an ordinary person, and I admit I watch these things, but I do watch them with a, say, discerning sort of eye on them and knowing what they are. And I think it's actually good to know your enemy and know what they're doing. So I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing, as long as you're aware that that's what you're doing and see yourself in that kind of third person viewing it rather than absorbing it.
Yeah, actually, I was talking to Natalie the other day, World of NC on Twitter.
Yeah. She's
and we were both saying how actually, like, if you watch like Jeremy Vine show, like that's basically a blueprint for what they want to bring in. Like Jeremy Vine just tells you everything they want to do in 3 months' time. That's it. They talk about vax passports. 3 months later, they're going to do them. Now they're talking about mandatory vaccines, so they're going to try and bring that in probably, I would say, around February time. It's just so the script is written. It's written by Jeremy Vine's production team. So thanks for that, guys.
Well, I've always said that I think that the psychology is that we have to want, that when I say we, I mean most of the public have to want it for themselves. So that's why they play this yes/no game. They start by floating something and denying it. Oh, this is happening in another country, but we'd never do that. And then slowly it changes, and we get all these YouGov polls. What do you think, and what would you do, and then it seeps in, doesn't it, as an idea, oh, this has been leaked, but they'll deny it. And slowly, say we play this yes and no game, and it's happened every single time. And it's as if that they have to make people want it for themselves rather than thrust it upon them, which, of course, from a psychological point of view, if you did that to people, they'd have none of it, would they? They'd refuse to go along. But if you make someone think that something is your idea and that you want it, then it's a clever tool that they use, really. I think
nudge tactics, I think it's called.
Yeah, I think the kind of some people call it incompetence, but it's far from incompetence. It's actually very clever what they do, but it appears like incompetence. You've only got to look at sort of Boris Johnson, his persona, the clown, all the rest of it. But he's a very well-read man. He's not got into that position by not being. But a lot of people are fooled by that persona, and they think that he's this incompetent idiot, and they just want someone to replace him. But who are you going to get? I mean, when we got rid of Matt Hancock, we got Sajid Javid. Is he any better? Not really, is it? It's more of the same. It's just the shop front that's changed. The shop still sells the same shite. So yeah.
Yeah, and we knew from the beginning that Sajid Javid was a World Economic Forum, one of their boys. Like he's on their website and he's his photos on there and he's got a little piece about him. So like we knew what he was going to bring in. We shouldn't be surprised by any of this because it was obvious. I mean. Like he's done his masters proud, and we shouldn't have expected anything different. Like it's just so obvious. But there we are. Anyway, you mentioned that you now are no longer working as a face painter, and I'm just interested to know kind of like how in which other ways your life has changed as a result of this, and how your outlook on life or your ambitions have changed.
Oh, well, before all this happened, I really wanted to travel. That was my sort of reason, really, my reason for being. I love travel. I loved looking forward to where I was going to go next, what I was going to do, was going to meet. And now I've had to change my views on that and just accept that maybe I'll never go anywhere again, which is, unless I conform to what they're peddling. and that's quite heavy on me, really. And it's really made me have to think deeply about what my new wishes are. Where do I want to go, and is it possible to shrink that, or should I be trying to shrink it, or should I be trying to just see past it and see this as a difficult few years? Or it's I mean, am I right that you were in Mexico, is that right? Yeah. And I've got a friend who's in Egypt right now, and she inspires me a lot because she kind of arrived there by chance, and she didn't intend to go to Egypt. I think it was just one of those things where a lot of people were using them at the time as kind of, I don't know what you call them, pass-through places, countries to they call it neutralizing this stay, so that then when they got back home, they wouldn't have to stay in one of these quarantine hotels. And that's I think what she did at the time, and she liked it there. She's ended up staying. She's now got this school home learning thing that she's doing, that she's fronting, and it's people like that that inspire me, because she's like a real friend that I know in real life. And when you see real people doing things and finding ways around this stuff, I mean, I think she had to do the test to get into Egypt, but now she's there, there's none of that rubbish going on. And the way she talks about it to me, it really inspires me and makes me think maybe there can be a better way of doing things. And that's the other thing, I'll just mention it while we're on Egypt, is that this whole notion of African countries, and we need to vaccinate Africa and all the rest of it. And she's told me that they're not concerned about it at all. A few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when they were having all those sandstorms, there were scorpions flying through the air and whatever. That's what they were concerned about. That was a real problem to them. But COVID isn't a real problem to them, and they're just getting on with it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I actually think that if we didn't have this scaremongering media, we would be doing the exact same thing. It just seems that they haven't got the African countries on board with this agenda. I guess that they just figure, well, if we can get the Western world, because it's not just the African countries as well. It's even in kind of Central and South America, it's not a huge thing. Nowhere near as much as it is in the Western countries. I think that their view is, well, these countries will just like follow whatever we do. So Africa, they're going to, if we decide to bring in global tyranny, they'll just have to conform to it because they're too poor to do anything about it. That seems to be the attitude. But actually, from everything that I've heard in these countries, if you actually go to these countries, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's doing anything about it. They're perfectly fine. They're not got, cases through the roof or hospitalization, death, none of that. Because they're not doing mass testing, they're not doing mass vaccinations. They're just living life normally. And, people can't see that because, people have such a kind of Western-centric view of the world that they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore what's going on in other places because, if the BBC is telling me that everyone's dying, I'm sure it must be true, even though, they'll never talk about the countries where people are not dying. Anyway, I kind of went on a bit of a tangent there, but
no, it's the whole testing thing. It keeps the dream alive, doesn't it? That is, to me, the single thing that you can do to, or not do, to sort of end this thing, because that's why it's not showing in Africa. And it's not a case of, oh, these people are too poor to do the tests, they haven't got the resources. It's a case of, when you've got to decide which member of your family gets an education, or, who's going to walk 3 miles to the well, or whatever it is, it's not on your mind about this. It's the whole first world problems and third world problems thing, isn't it? And if you've got real stuff to deal with, then that's, if you've got scorpions flying through the air in sandstorms, that's surely more of a priority than something that's a bit like flu. If you've got things like malaria and yellow fever or whatever it is over there that they have, again, it's more of an issue than flu, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the crazy thing, though, is that people like us are supposedly selfish, because we don't give such high priority to COVID, and we actually think that things that are really high risk, like heart disease and cancer and like serious diseases, actually are the important thing that we should be focusing on, and the NHS waiting list and stuff. But actually, the duplicity really is so obvious to me when you have people who say things like, oh, we need to all be taking our booster and this, that, and the other. I never hear those same people saying, oh, you know what, like maybe we shouldn't be giving a 5-year-old a vaccine for a disease that they're literally immune to. Maybe we should be trying to help people in another country who are older or whatever. It's just and then when you go to that country, they're not interested in it anyway, because they're like, well, why do we need a vaccine for this disease which isn't killing anyone? Like you said, we've got malaria over here. So it's like just this weird kind of, you follow it round, you follow the kind of reasoning round, and what you end up in every single time for me is you come back to the point where you started, which is this is just a mass hysteria, which just doesn't make any sense. And the people calling other people selfish are the ones who actually are generally acting upon their own irrational fear. That seems to be what it is to me, which is an incredibly selfish thing to do.
But it's a fear that's been cultivated, isn't it? It's not a fear that it's been planted and it's been raised. So it's understandable, really, that to people. I was watching I can't remember who it was now. The interview recently. It was on YouTube about this theory that it's mass formation, that it's like a mass hypnosis, and I believe that. So if you actually believe that that's what's taking place, then you can at least be sympathetic to these people who are fearful. And maybe sympathy is not what's required, but empathy. I think there's a lot of this division where people are keen to do the whole us and them, and I fall into it myself sometimes, depending on which side of my personality is taking over on Twitter. But I fall into it as well, and this whole the good, the bad, us, them, they've done this. But where we can find those moments to connect with other people and build those bridges, that's how I think I wrote it on Twitter yesterday that I like to think of things a lot in terms of stories and fairy tales. And the one that came to mind after I'd read this theory of this mass formation was Sleeping Beauty, the way that she has to sleep for a long, long time. The thickets have to grow high and tall. Several princes have to try and cut through that before the right one comes and awakens Sleeping Beauty. And that's how I think we get out of this. I think it has to go through a certain length of time. I think that they have to hear the message from several others saying it. And then eventually the right person will say it with love and it will hit the right note and she'll wake.
That was great. That was really poetic. I love that. So that's a good note, I think, to start rounding up on. So do you want to just let people know where they can find you, first of all, but also any final thoughts that you kind of want to share?
I was going to actually end by reading my poem that I wrote. That's my pinned post on there, because what I try and write things that will resonate with different people, because I think that you will awaken people with different tools in different ways. So sometimes I'll write something that's like an angry rant, and that will resonate with people, and it will fire them up. It will get their passion going. But sometimes if you write something that's quite poetic, it will chime with another group of people, and they're often the people that need to hear it more. So I wrote this poem, and I'll read it now and see if hopefully it means.
Yeah, please do.
Is that okay? Yeah? Right. It's called A Needle and the Thread. A needle took a journey through the fabric of our heads, from old people in rocking chairs to babies snuggled in their beds. It skewered through dreams as ripe balloons, until one day someone said, "Look, you may have got the needle, but you sure have lost the thread." Can we gather skirts of reason, survey this crude repair? Did we ever really fix those holes you saw? Is life ever fit for wear? We're patchworking society with a tool of sharp divide, demonizing friends and neighbours who dare suggest another side. The thread we choose is paramount to get this darning right. We can sew with barbed wire or gossamer, make our stitches loose or tight, but we're richer cloth for differences. We have more layers to face the cold. A shawl that's birthed with yarn of love is a garment to behold. Each spider gave her heart to instinct, to her the needle's dead. Nature's law decreed she focus on the substance of her thread.
Great, love it.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Do you want to just let people know where they can find you, and then we'll round it off there?
Yeah, I'm just on as Mother of Hope, opinionated mom, number 1, I think it says. Yeah, so that's it. And thanks. It's been interesting talking to you. I was enjoying the chat with Anna that you did the other day.
Oh yeah. Anna was great. She's a straight shooter, and my one coming up with Natalie as well. I think people are going to really like that.
Yeah. Well, let's say it's the first time I've done anything like this, so I was a bit nervous, but
hey, not all. You did great. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks to me. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.